Welcome, High Floor Heroes. This is High Floor Fantasy. I'm Chad, and my goal is getting you closer to a championship. Let's have a look at the quarterback starts for Week 13. Jalen Hurts in New York facing the Jets. Tom Brady at Atlanta. Kirk Cousins at Detroit. Carson Wentz at Houston. And Derek Carr versus the Washington football team. Derek Carr has been somewhat of an under-the-radar player this season. He's currently sitting at number 9 among quarterbacks. He's been quietly consistent, throwing 300 yards or more in 6 games. He's also thrown a touchdown in all but 1 game. Carr is at home this week facing a porous Washington defense who rank dead last in defending quarterbacks. Lock Carr in as a solid QB2. Week 12 sits at quarterback. Justin Fields versus Arizona. Joe Burrow versus the Chargers. Tua T versus the Giants, Jared Goff versus Minnesota, and Mac Jones at Buffalo. Mac Jones has burst onto the scene as an outstanding quarterback under the tutelage of Bill Belichick. This week, though, is not the week to start him. Jones has been passing more lately, throwing multiple touchdowns in 2 of the last 3 games. This weekend's trip to Buffalo, however, may throw some cold water on the passing attack. Buffalo ranks as the number 1 defense against quarterbacks and wide receivers, so expect to see more work in the running game from New England. Let Jones sit this one out. We have 4 teams on bye this week: Cleveland, Green Bay, Carolina, and Tennessee. Make sure to update your rosters and bench those bye week players. Let's move on to the starts at the running back position. Myles Gaskin versus the Giants, Leonard Fournette at Atlanta, Antonio Gibson at Las Vegas, James Conner at Chicago, and Joe Mixon versus the Chargers. Finally, Joe Mixon is putting together the season that fantasy owners have been hoping for. He has avoided the injuries that have plagued the last few seasons, and he's sitting at the number 2 spot headed into Week 13. Mixon has racked up 3 games with 100 or more yards, and he has scored in 8 consecutive games. He also has 4 straight games with multiple scores. This week, Cincinnati is hosting the Chargers, who are allowing almost 23 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Keep the streak alive and start Joe Mixon. Now we'll have a look at the running back sits. Mike Davis versus Tampa Bay, Devontae Booker at Miami. You can sit the duo of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss in Buffalo. Zach Moss is droppable at this point. And finally, David Montgomery versus Arizona. Montgomery has been a bit of a dud this season. He's had 5 games hovering at the 10 or less fantasy point level. Injuries have also been a problem, sidelining him for 4 games. He hasn't found the end zone in his last 3 outings. The Arizona defense is ranked number 5 against opposing running backs, allowing less than 16 fantasy points per game. Mandatory Montgomery is a little less mandatory this week. My apologies for getting this video out 1 day later than I would have liked, but it's never a bad time for a reminder to keep Thursday night players out of your flex spot. I hope you all had a good Thursday night game. Moving on to the starts at the wide receiver position. Van Jefferson versus Jacksonville, Marquise Brown at Pittsburgh, Chris Godwin at Atlanta, Deontay Johnson versus Baltimore, and Jalen Waddle versus the Giants. Miami has been somewhat of a surprise this season, and Waddle has emerged as a top 10 wide receiver, trending up in his last 2 games. I didn't even know who he was at the beginning of the year, but now he's at the number 4 spot. Waddle has seen 8 or more receptions in 3 of the last 4 games. That volume has resulted in 2 scores in the last 3 games, but he's consistently put up double-digit fantasy points without being touchdown dependent. Miami hosts the Giants this week in what should be a middle-of-the-road defensive matchup for Waddle. The chemistry with Tua continues to gel, and Waddle is a must-start going forward. Now for the sits at wide receiver. Jacoby Myers at Buffalo, Tyler Boyd versus the Chargers, Elijah Moore versus Philly, Emmanuel Sanders versus New England, and Brandon Ayuk at Seattle. While Brandon Ayuk has seen a slight uptick in volume in the passing game overall on the year, he's just been too inconsistent to trust. Deebo Samuel has established himself as a primary threat in San Francisco, leaving Ayuk near the bottom of the pack. Even with Deebo Samuel being out for this week's game, I still can't trust Ayuk with George Kittle on the field. Ayuk has seen only 3 receptions in 2 of his last 3 outings. I might be going against consensus with this recommendation, but the matchup this week just isn't favorable for San Francisco. I'm sitting Ayuk this week. Finally, we'll look at the tight end position. Start C.J. Uzomah versus the Chargers, Kyle Pitts versus Tampa Bay, Dallas Goedert at the Jets, Darren Waller versus Washington, and Pat Freiermuth versus Baltimore. Keep an eye on the concussion protocol for Freiermuth as he heads into a classic AFC North matchup this week. He's emerged as a breakout tight end this year. Freiermuth is clearly a favorite red zone target for Pittsburgh. He has 6 touchdowns on the year, including 5 scores in the last 5 games. This rivalry matchup is sure to be a bruiser, with Pittsburgh at home and Baltimore giving up almost 11 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Freiermuth is a lock if he plays. Finally, for the sits at tight end. Cole Kmet versus Arizona, Tyler Conklin at Detroit, Evan Ingram at Miami, Jared Cook at Cincinnati, and Gerald Everett versus San Francisco. Gerald Everett is near the bottom of the pack among tight ends. He's been very consistent, just consistently bad, averaging less than 8 fantasy points per game. He's averaging just 3 receptions per game on the year, so he's not a favorite target for Russell Wilson. He also can't seem to find the end zone. The 49ers are very tough against tight ends, allowing just 5 fantasy points per game. Keep Everett on the bench for this bad matchup. That'll do it for the Week 13 starts and sits. Follow me on all the socials. Patreon and Instagram are both High Floor Fantasy, and Twitter is @HighFloorTweets. You can find all the links in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave a comment down below. Thank you, and best of luck in Week 13.